Hey, everybody out there in YouTube land. Jake, the OneManBand, is back again, bringing you another RWBY review, and this time, it's going to be something a little different. As you can already see, you are not looking at my pretty face. Instead, you're listening to my nice and awesome voice. Nah, I'm just kidding. Anyway, if you guys would prefer this over to looking at my face, then let me know, but anyway, let's jump right in, shall we? Alright, this time we're going to be looking at all the secondary characters that I deemed worthy of at least talking a bit about. There are a few characters that I'm going to neglect to talk about, but it's because I do not think I have enough information on them to actually give a proper review about them. So anyway, let's get started. First up, Professor OZPIN. Basically the Dumbledore of Beacon Academy. Now, the only hint towards a weapon that he has is pretty much like TORCHWICK. He uses a cane, or it looks like a cane, but it also doubles as a sword. But then it also has clockwork mechanisms in it. Now, obviously, he's going to use it as a sword, but do the clockwork mechanisms, are they going to make it dust compatible, or how are they prevalent? Or is it just a homage to his symbol? Now, as what his semblance is, it's up in the air. I have no idea. Professor OZPIN is pretty mysterious, and it pretty much goes hand in hand with his inspiration with the Wizard of Oz, the Great and Powerful. Now, as for being manipulative and not very powerful, I don't think that's really the case. But, as we saw in the last scene of Volume 1, he does work on things behind the scenes. He was contacting Professor Crow at Signal Academy about information, I believe that was about CINDER. So, obviously, he takes that from his inspiration, where he kind of works behind the scenes and is a bit of a strategist. So he's a real smart cookie. Another thing to take into account is the fact that OZPIN stated to RWBY that he has made more mistakes than any man, woman, or child. Now, this both gives him a humbling persona and also opens up the opportunity to make a hypothesis on his past. Now, I believe that when he was younger, OZPIN was very brash, headstrong, and maybe a bit of a delinquent. But then something tragic probably happened, maybe concerning CINDER, or maybe RWBY's mother. You know, that's going back to the whole she has silver eyes deal. But anyway, this caused him to kind of become more responsible because he saw what his actions did, and the only way to make it right was to change how he acted in society. Now, with him being the headmaster of Beacon Academy, he probably hasn't seen combat in a while. So, with the time that he spent as headmaster, he's probably not that battle-hardened as of the recent years. I mean, we have seen that GLYNDA GOODWITCH went out and went on a mission to try to apprehend Roman TORCHWICK, but I believe that OZPIN's responsibilities now lie within being a commander, being a strategist, and basically stuff of that caliber. But I am hoping that we will see him in a combat scenario in Volume 2. I think that would be really cool to see. Alrighty, next up on our list is GLYNDA GOODWITCH. What's her inspiration? Well, it's from the Wizard of Oz, too. It's the Good Witch, you know, that helps Dorothy. She's a strict, no-nonsense kind of person that does care deeply for the students of Beacon. She's also OZPIN's number 2 in basically everything. Now, I believe that when both GOODWITCH and OZPIN first came to Beacon, they were paired up. And OZPIN was kind of the cocky, playful one, while GOODWITCH was the strict and no-nonsense kind of one. Kind of like Ruby and Weiss, if you think about it. Something to think about right there. GLYNDA GOODWITCH's weapon is actually a riding crop, and for any of you who don't know that, it's a short whip thing that British royalty used to get around on horses, something like that. but it's not that much of a melee combat weapon. GOODWITCH seems to focus more on ranged attacks using dust itself, and using the riding crop as a sort of wand. And it sucks because I prefer staffs. And with her being a ranged fighter, she's either going to be a buffer, a defender, or a supporter to her melee teammates and other ranged combatants. We've already seen GLYNDA GOODWITCH in action, but we haven't seen her in a team battle or really a battle with a melee opponent. We've only seen her in sort of a dust duel with CINDER. Alrighty, next up, which I want to talk about, is Professor Peter Port, the grim biologist expert teacher guy at Beacon. His inspiration seems to be less of a historical figure and more of a mixture of inside jokes at the Roosterteeth office. The first part of the inspiration is the whole bouncing mustache thing, which was originally going to go to Agent Wyoming from Red vs. Blue in Season 10 when he had his helmet off. He has a big handlebar mustache. It's pretty freaking awesome. And second, Ryan Haywood, the person who voices Professor Port, he has strange wants for capturing the animals of Minecraft. For more information, just go ahead and watch Red vs. Blue Season 10 and the Minecraft Let's Plays. Pretty much all we know about Professor Port is that in his youth, he not only fought the creatures of Grimm, but captured them. And he may have had a whole rags to riches thing going on, because he did state that his grandfather, or his father, basically a predecessor of his family, did smell of cabbages. But if you take a look at his clothing sense, he seems to be of a more higher echelon of people. So maybe in his younger years he found fame and fortune with both capturing and hunting Grimm creatures. And even though he's an older gentleman now, he still captures creatures of Grimm, as we've seen from the captured Grimm boar thing that Weiss had to fight in the classroom. So, I could totally see Professor Port deep within the bowels of Beacon Academy performing mad scientist experiments on the Grimm creatures. Professor Port's weapon is a giant double-bladed battle axe / blunderbuss. And for those of you who don't know what a blunderbuss is, well, basically, here's a basic rundown on how it went. You would put gunpowder down the barrel, much like an old musket, and then you would basically shove whatever you can find down the barrel, and then anything within 5 feet of you, in front of you, would be dead. Now, basically, it was a big giant shotgun, which basically fired anything you put into it. But it lacks any kind of range. So Professor Port's gonna probably be mainly a melee fighter, using both his battle axe and the blunderbuss to hit people with dust bullets and perform giant savage strikes with his double-edged battle axe. But one thing I could definitely see is him shoving a net inside his blunderbuss and shooting it at Grimm creatures to capture them. Oh, you hear that, Monty? You should totally put that in a future episode. Guys, make sure this is seen by Monty Ulm. I think it'll be hilarious. Alrighty, time for the least known about of all the professors of Beacon Academy. Professor OOBLECK. Bartholomew OOBLECK. Despite knowing of his status as the history professor and the insane speed ability that he has, which puts him on par with both RWBY and Blake due to their speed abilities, but his speed ability may be different. I'm not quite sure yet. But anyway, we have no idea what type of weapon he uses, or if he even uses a weapon at all. What we can take away is from the disheveled quality of his classroom, his vast conspiracy web of the whole planet, and his never-ending supply of coffee and caffeine. OOBLECK is a historian, theorist, and probably strategist. He probably knows many forms of combat and can discover weaknesses and provide logistics support to his teammates. Being a big history buff myself, his knowledge will come in handy in future battles. And since he's part of the OZPIN GOODWITCH and Port team, they got themselves a strict melee fighter, Port, a melee/ranged fighter, maybe, in OZPIN, a ranged fighter in GOODWITCH, and then we have the support, which is OOBLECK. Probably the best way I can describe Professor OOBLECK maybe being in battle is kinda like Sherlock Holmes, the Robert Downey Jr. version. Anyway, that's our Beacon Professors team right there. We got OZPIN, Port, GLYNDA, GOODWITCH, and OOBLECK. Well, now that you mention it, they kinda look a lot like the professors from Harry Potter. We got Professor Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall, we got Snape, and then we got Mad-Eye? Here we go. CARDIN Winchester, Beacon's resident bully, jerk, racist. Basically, he's a bad dude. He's not nice. His inspiration comes from the historical cardinal. Alrighty, time to move on to some of the students. And condemning Joan of Arc to her death. So, that's why he has a beef with Jeanne d'Arc. You see, it's funny. CARDIN's weapon seems to be a giant two-handed mace, even though he seems to be able to use it with one hand just as easy. But aside from that, this mace looks like it comes straight from Mordor. I mean, look at that thing. I mean, I'm not surprised Lord Sauron isn't walking around looking for his lost mace. But with the combination of his armor set and weapon, he seems like he would have both solid defense and powerful, yet maybe slow attack. So basically, he's the team's tank, it looks like. But so far, CARDIN's bark seems to be worse than his bite. I mean, when it came to fighting the giant Ursa in the Forest of Forever Fall, I mean, he couldn't even get a hit in. He was just getting pummeled. And even though he did take the damage quite well, he wasn't able to dish out any. Plus, his team was full of cowards and ran away. CARDIN may talk a big game, but it looks like when it actually comes to fighting, he may just turn tail and run. The only way to know for sure is to wait for Volume 2 to come out, which we're all doing. And from being a monkey faunus to his weapon, the similarities are all lined up and right there. And if you've read Journey to the West like me, the idea of a Sun Wukong character is exciting. Next up, my favorite characters here, Sun Wukong. Acrobatics abilities, a tail that can support his entire body, and also works as a third arm. And he's very, very capable with his weapon, which is a cudel, which that's what it's called in Journey of the West. But if you wish to call it a bow staff, you may. He uses this cudgel as both a very effective offensive weapon and a defensive weapon. And it gets even better. His weapon breaks down into dual nunchuck lever action dust blasters. You have no idea how hard it is to say that. But the combination of these nunchucks and his cudgel, he basically has an unbeatable melee combat combo. Now, the Sun Wukong from Journey to the West has no viable weaknesses. And so, I'm having a hard time coming up with a weakness for RWBY's Sun Wukong. I mean, how do you nerf a being that takes down demons, armies of heaven, celestial beings, and gods themselves? And that's only in the first 7 chapters of the story. I don't know how you nerf somebody like that. Basically, the only thing I can see is that he may have trouble with ranged combat. I mean, he is able to block ranged attacks, but when it comes to multiple ranged attacks from multiple sides, he may have trouble with that. And also, on the ways of armor, he doesn't seem to have much of it. He has verabraces and gauntlets. That's about it. Oh, and one last thing. He may be a potential love interest for Blake, as long as Adam doesn't come showing up, which we know he will. I mean, he better. Alrighty, next up is Velvet Scarlatina, the mysterious bunny faunus that is on everyone's mind, basically. Now, I can't really think of any sort of inspiration behind her character, except that the fact that they wanted to put another Faunus in there. That way, when Blake turned out to be a Faunus, it wasn't such a big deal that a Faunus was at Beacon. And since she's a bunny Faunus, she has a very timid nature, which makes her getting picked on by Team Cardinal all that more easier. But with this upcoming volume, we know that she is going to be in combat. Now, Velvet's weapon is a complete mystery. The only clue that we have is that it's carried in a rather large trunk. And yes, I do mean trunk. It's not a case, it's an actual trunk. But due to the fact that she's going to act as a form of mage, I made the assumption about 2 videos ago that she's going to wield some form of staff. Now, some of you guys agreed, some of you didn't agree, and brought in your own ideas on what kind of weapon it was going to be. Some of you even put that it may be some sort of giant turret that comes out of the case, which would be freaking awesome. And if it was a turret, it would require a rather large amount of time to set up or charge if it, worked on some sort of charging mechanism. But I got another idea for you. In an anime called Trigun, there is a wandering priest who carries a giant cross on his back. And when asked about why it's so big, he simply states that it's full of mercy. While in actuality, it is a big gun, as well as carrying smaller guns in the side compartments. So maybe Velvet's weapon is a sort of homage to that. It's got some sort of big weapon in it, but it's also got smaller weapons that Velvet can use to both support her team and attack with. Alrighty, next up, guys, we got Cinder Fall, our lead bad guy for this volume. She's powerful, pretty, and scary, and that's never a good combo. Now, her inspiration comes from the story Cinderella, and it's because of that I believe at some point in her life that she was maybe abused or rejected in some way to cause her emotional pain. And I have my own thoughts about what it is, but that's a story for another time. Another video in the future. Cinder's way of fighting is very appropriate for her name. She uses fire dust and doesn't seem to have to use a weapon as a conduit. So there's only one explanation, guys. Cinder is a dust bender. That is the only logical explanation. Now, there's no real explanation on how she's able to do this, or if it's all that weird to be able to control dust without a weapon. All we've seen is that anybody who's controlled dust has had a weapon on them, and has used it as some sort of conduit. Now, Cinder's style of fighting seems to be very focused on ranged attacks. She's able to block ranged attacks quite easily, as well as attack with fire dust. She's able to blast things, catch things on fire, create a fire in her hand, stuff along those lines. But in seeing that, it seems that her weakness may well be melee combat. I mean, we haven't seen her in melee combat before. There's a very small snippet of it of the Volume 2 intro, but I really want to save my assumptions to where we actually get into the volume, we see her in combat, because, hey, she may be a total powerhouse, and may be unstoppable for all we know. Only time will tell. Alrighty, time for a familiar enemy for you guys, Roman Torchwick. Now, my personal thoughts are that his inspiration doesn't primarily come from history, but actually comes from a movie, The Clockwork Orange. I mean, come on, he has a cane, a bowler hat, orange hair, and even the eye makeup thing going on. Yeah, I just blew your mind, didn't I? He seems to be the thug leader of the group of bad guys, and he doesn't mind getting into the fray of things. Roman Torchwick's weapon is the melodic kugel. And for all of you who don't know what kugel is, it's basically a blunt object that's like a club or something along those lines. And you know what's also funny about his weapon's name? Melodic. Why would it be melodic? Maybe somewhere along the lines of Singing in the Rain? Back to the whole Clockwork Orange thing. You know what I mean? Huh? Moving on. His weapon acts as both a blunt club and a form of rifle. He has already gone toe-to-toe with both RWBY and Blake, and has held his own against them. But, due to the circumstances, he has always run away from the fight, rather than finishing it. Now, does this make him a coward? I'm not sure, because he always had something else to do. You know, he had plans that he had to put into motion. Now, when it comes to a fight to the end, I'm pretty sure that Roman's gonna be the type of guy who wants to stick around and finish off his enemies. And another key thing to remember about Torchwick, he seems to be a very good negotiator due to the fact that he was able to form an alliance with the White Fang while being a human. But who knows, maybe Roman Torchwick is really a faunus, or maybe he's just a human. But here's another theory. He always has one of his eyes covered by his hair. What if that eye is his semblance, and he has some sort of hypnotic power with that eye? I mean, it's not all that crazy. We do have characters from other anime that have powers like that. So why not here? Now, Adam is probably the least known about and probably the most requested character to enter the series. I mean, those are my thoughts. I want to see some action from that guy. Now, when being a faunus and a fighter for the White Fang, he does have a history with Blake. Whether it was one of romance or not is still to be questioned about. Adam wields Wilt and Blush, a sword/sheath combo that are very, very deadly. Wilt is a ninjato-style sword, which is like a katana, but it's shorter, straighter, and is sturdier. And Blush is its sheath that also doubles as a rifle and can fire both dust as well as Wilt itself. By what was shown in the Black trailer, Adam fights with a form of Landio style. I sure hope I'm pronouncing that right. Basically, that's where the strike comes quickly, and then he sheaths the sword before striking again. The style makes him quick and precise in his strikes. And also, I have my own thoughts about what his semblance is. He may have some form of being able to absorb dust energy, or aura energy, due to the fact that he was able to absorb the giant blast from the mech on the train and then use its power against it to slash it in half. So maybe he's able to absorb dust energy, rework it into his own attack to perform a giant finishing blow. Now, my biggest concern about Adam is that he does have a fierce loyalty to the White Fang. And with the White Fang teaming up with Roman Torchwick, is Adam going to have to fight Blake? I mean, he's going to have to choose a side eventually. It's then we'll probably figure out where Adam's loyalties truly lie. Alrighty, last but certainly not least, we got the socially awkward Penny. Now, despite being weird and ditzy, I believe that Penny is a cyborg or a robot or one of those things. Maybe she's even created to be the ultimate weapon against the grim creatures or something like that. Penny's fighting style seems to be sword puppeteering, if that's a real word. She uses razor wire and maybe even a form of telekinesis to control her swords around her to form circles, discs. I mean, she was able to make short work of the White Faunus cronies, and she never really went into defensive mode. She was just attack, attack. Yet, she is able to use her swords to channel her energy into some sort of giant cutting laser, which is freaking awesome. She's also strong enough to pull an airship out of the sky. Now, my real question is, if she's a robot, she wouldn't have an aura due to the fact that she isn't a living being. But if she's a cyborg with human parts, then she would still have an aura, wouldn't she? Now, is her giant laser powered by an aura or by some radioactive reactor that houses kryptonite in her chest? Only time will tell, but I'm pretty sure she's part robot in some way. Alrighty, guys, I think that's going to finish this video up. I know I didn't really go into that much detail about any one character, but I really wanted to just get this out to you, get my thoughts about people's fighting styles, their inspirations. I just wanted to give you some quick facts about the secondary characters. If you like this version of my in-depth looks where it's just my voice and you're looking at pretty pictures instead of my ugly mug, then go ahead and leave a comment down below. And, of course, leave your own theories, hypothesize, no matter how crazy, down below in the comments. I love to hear them, and next time I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk about the intro music, the new song. So, I'll see you guys next time I'm out there in YouTube land. I'll see you later, all you RWBY lovers.